everybody, it's Chanchai. Hope you're all doing really well. Hope you've had a great week so far. We're getting towards the latter half of the week, and lots of good stuff. Anyhow, this week, earlier, I had recorded the Chanchai's Dojo episode 3, which talked about autopilot. It talked about shifting gears, and it talked about basically virtual boxing, how boxing works in Virtua Fighter, and those are all very important points. This is sort of the extension of that episode, and in this episode, or this sub-episode, we're going to be talking about, we're going to be extending how we talked about the autopilot aspect of this, or the shifting gears. The shifting gears is kind of about how much is kind of you're playing more of a reaction-based, like a reflex-based fighting, versus more mindful, slow yourself down to think about your options carefully and assess the situation. In real time, it's still very, very fast, but the difference is kind of that with enough training and with enough experience in your Virtua Fighter, you just have a lot of good options. You could kind of think about them as good habits, and we're going to talk about habits today, but really let's think about options, because a habit is something that we do as if it wasn't an option, and an option are things that could have been habits, but basically we turn them into decision points. And it doesn't mean that we have to slow down and completely think about them. In fact, we can train to have reflexive decisions making. That when the decision points happen, reflexively we make quick choices. With the practice and the training having done the thinking for us already, just simply understanding that it's a mix-up can do a lot of things, and it can even take some of your hesitance, your overthinking out of it a little bit. So we're going to talk about that. But let's go back into this autopiloting aspect, where autopilot, yesterday I said that with autopilot, it's good to think of it as basically you're still acting, you're still doing things, but you're using assistance. In this case, you're using your training, just like a pilot uses these autopilot subsystems to assist in all the extra tasks that they do, and that way it kind of it increases the chance of success, it reduces the chance of failure, it increases the operation, increases that it just gets done. Everything that needs to get done gets done. Autopilot doesn't have to be a bad thing. The thing that players are worried about is not so much the quote-unquote autopilot. They're worried about making bad decisions by not making decisions. They're worried about having bad habits that are exploitable, right? Or even good habits becoming bad habits, because especially in a game like Virtua Fighter, every single thing you do in Virtua Fighter, there is something that can punish it. There's many things that can punish it. So it's not even just that there's something to counter what you're doing. There's almost always a lot of different ways to counter what someone is doing. There's always a bunch of different ways to counter what you are doing. And that's why in VF you've got to be very dynamic, because if you keep doing the same thing, you're not just like... In some games there are some oppressive patterns that are not... They're good things, but they're ways to lock the opponent in, right? And in Virtua Fighter you kind of have it with the boxing. The boxing is a very safe and difficult sequence to defeat. It's a very safe sequence that is difficult to defeat because it's just very solid. It uses the principles of speed. It uses the frame advantages in a good way, and it trains you on the basic decision points in the game. So if you're doing them well, you're doing good. But the thing is any decision you make, even in the boxing, can get countered, right? When you go high jab, you can get low, right? If you go low jab, you can get hop attacked, right? Now mids are safer, but they're not perfect, right? You can still get backdashed. So there's still counter options to everything that's being done. Now each of those counter options carry risk, and those are little factors that add up to why an opponent may not be doing those all the time. And that's just the principle of boxing too, you know? We can't just 1-2 all day in boxing, but there are so many good moments to 1-2 an opponent in boxing. So many times where it's a good thing, and then there's a few cases where it's a bad thing. It's the same in VF. There's a counter to everything. And so, autopilot is not really a problem, because autopilot still has decision making. It's just done a lot quicker. It's just done with maybe using the subconscious more than the conscious, and maybe using kind of a reflex and relying on your ability to react to what's coming your way, and that you've already trained yourself to have a proper response to a lot of the things that are coming, so you just kind of do them. And it just means that you're not slowing yourself down to think about it so hard, but you're still thinking and you're still processing, and it's just running at a different gear than that super mindful thing. When things go wrong, that's when we are incentivized to slow things down so we can make things right again. And then we can also speed it up. This is also why typically the player who is dictating the pace is usually the one who has the advantage. If we're playing card games like Magic the Gathering, or maybe even Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't know Yu-Gi-Oh! Or maybe even Yu-Gi-Oh! Certainly like in Pokemon, there is a concept that we call who is the beatdown. That was a concept that was named that way by Michael Flores, who was a writer who liked writing about Magic the Gathering. And it's a great concept. There's a card game I play called Legends of Runeterra, and that game, because you're almost always in a situation where your resources are pretty available for what you can do based on what cards you have. So you got to make decisions there. One of the biggest decisions you have to make in that game is who is the beatdown. Who has the advantage here? Who is the person who should be aggressive? And in Virtua Fighter, it's pretty simple. A lot of the time, it's a really good idea that the person who has a frame advantage be the aggressor, and the person who is at frame disadvantage is more incentivized to use a defensive, more passive action. However, in Virtua Fighter, it is a paper, rock, scissors game, and there are aggressive actions that are awesome to do based on what you think your opponent's going to do with their frame advantage, and it may count what they're doing. Similarly, sorry, right now I gotta focus on the road because a lot of people don't want to let me squeeze into the lane that there's no option. So, alright, we're good back on the driving. Situation awareness is okay. We're going at the proper speed. Okay. Anyways, so let's talk about, I think everyone gets the point there. So now, let's get to the meat of this video, which I'm hoping to talk about for the next 10 minutes. Okay. We talked about autopilot, we talked about shifting gears, and we talked about virtual boxing in the last video. So on the autopilot front, let's focus on what we can do in our training. What are we working? What do we want in our autopilot? Like, what are the decisions that we're learning to do almost on a reflex level? And not just do, but how do we avoid them becoming bad habits? So let's start with the training. First, you need the reflex. So number one, you need to train your reflex. And for a reflex, you need something that's triggering that reflex. So in Street Fighter, it's like in the footsie when you see somebody overextend, right? But more than that, it's not even that. It's actually the activity of doing footsie and then confirming that your crouching mid kick like hits your opponent, right? Because you caught them stepping forward or back with stepping, and then and it resulted in hitting them, and it didn't whiff. So then you need to kind of act after that, right? And in Virtua Fighter, it could be a lot of people gravitate towards I block a big thing and I should punish. It is that, but in Virtua Fighter, as I've mentioned in a video before, it's better to focus on Nitaku as opposed to guard punish, because Nitaku just happens way more. And so you want to maximize your time, and you want to build skills. And Virtua Fighter is a game of a lot of skills. So are others, but Virtua Fighter is a lot of skills. So you want to maximize your skill growth overall, and not just say it has to be guard punish only, right? So what are common things then? Well, in Virtua Fighter, the most basic is actually the defensive reflex you should have, which is anytime that you're vulnerable and that where you really should just stand and guard in Virtua Fighter, anytime you're in that situation, you should be doing a guard throw escape. That's because in Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown and Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, we have a system that some people call lazy throw escape. The Japanese translation is that, but really it just simply means that you should always have a throw escape held no matter what, whenever you're really vulnerable, and especially in situations whenever you choose to just simply guard. Because when you guard, you're open to throw, so you might as well reduce the chance that you get thrown while you're guarding. Like, it's a no-brainer. It requires no brain to do this, but it does require some brain power to learn it, and to train it, and to get it down so that it's just muscle memory. And in Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, you absolutely should be training on this from day one. As soon as someone explains the concept to you, you should be learning how to do guard throw escape. If you have questions, feel free to leave a comment, I'll explain it. But basically, I'll explain it and I can show it, but basically, when you press and hold guard, while you're holding guard, you can press punch and hold it. And while you're holding both guard and punch, a neutral throw, a throw that's just guard and punch together, you will deny it. If they try to throw you with that throw, you will escape automatically. You didn't have to time it, you just had to have been holding it down during the time that they did that throw. And if you happen to tap it when that throw connected with you, same thing, you will escape the throw. And then there are 3 directions, including neutral. There is forward and there is backward. If they did a throw, like let's say they did a throw that's back, forward, then throw, and throw meaning punch and guard, then the escape forward is forward and throw, the last input of the throw. If they did a throw that was back throw, the escape is back and throw. Okay. Now, let's get back to how we train ourselves on reflex. We're not talking about options yet, we're talking about reflex, reaction. This is a reflex that you need to work on. The first step is just building the reflex. And building the reflex of doing guard throw escape. So just pick one throw that you're going to deny for the whole game. The whole game, not even the round, the whole game. And use that one. Now I recommend just deny the opponent the most damaging throw, and usually that's forward, so I would just tell a beginner, you know what, practice doing it with forward throw. Every time that you're guarding, press and hold guard, then after that, press and hold punch while still holding guard, so now you're holding that and forward. And so at the end of it, you would be guarding, and now you're holding forward, punch, and guard. And now you are just, for as long as you're guarding, you are denying the forward throw, the throw that ends with forward throw. And usually that's the strongest throw. So now you're almost always denying the strongest throw of your opponent. That's huge. You're limiting them to back throw and neutral throw, and you didn't have to think about it. You just had to train this reflex that says, anytime I'm in a situation where I would guard, I'm doing this forward throw escape also. And then you need to focus on that. And then the second part of that, you need to make it so that you're only doing it as long as you would normally guard. So a lot of times you're only guarding for just a moment in Virtua Fighter at a time. So you got to do it like that, and then you got to kind of stop doing that and move on to the next action. And the hard trap when you're learning is when your opponent doesn't throw you or doesn't attack you. So they're just standing there, and you're there holding guard and forward throw escape because you've been working on this, and you're waiting for, hoping that you'll escape a throw or block their attack. So the tricky part about this is, so now you've developed the reflex to do it, then you've got to integrate it into the flow of the match, meaning you need to only guard as long as you normally would guard. And only do this, and like let's say you do it a whiff, you still should do this technique, but you should only do it as long as you would have normally been worried about being hit. And if you're going to go attack next, then you need to let go and do the attack after that, right away. So you need to integrate this technique into your flow. So step one, just do the technique in a very brain-dead way, because you're focused on building your reflex. You're not focusing on your choices, you're focusing on building your reflex. So might as well just make a choice ahead of time of which one you're going to do, and don't worry about making the choice in real time. That choice has been made, it's going to be forward throw escape. Every time you would guard, forward throw escape. Every time you whiff an attack, forward throw escape, and then do the next thing. When you sidestep, you can also do forward throw escape. Just anytime you feel in danger, forward throw escape while holding guard. Guard, forward throw escape. Really, really important concept. Again, we're trading our reflex, we're trading our autopilot our automatic action to do this. Okay? And when we get good at that, then we need to integrate it into the normal flow so it's a normal part of our game and not so unnatural that it makes us do bad things. What's the bad thing? That you're holding forward throw escape guard forever, because now you're just sitting there waiting for the next action or waiting for the action you were hoping for. Now you got to integrate this into your normal flow of guarding, movement, defending, attacking. It's got to be integrated with that. After you've gotten good at both of those, then you can start worrying about the choice. And I have a really good article about throw escape strategies and understanding throw strategies so that you have an idea of which throw strategies to use. I have a really good guide on that. A lot of people have shared it. I'll link it in the video too, in the description and in the comments. But I have a really good guide for that. But that's only after you've got the reflex. You've got the autopilot reaction to do a guard throw escape. I know that was a long talk, but that's just one of the many things that you're going to be building into your skill set. It's one of the skills you have to have in this game, is to be able to just have a built-in throw escape whenever you're defending, whenever you're moving, and then flowing like normal, and then later making powerful decisions on it. But the decisions come later, and again, we're talking about the autopilot, just kind of what you do automatically. And later on, okay, so then what's the problem? So now that we've built the reflex, now we've been able to apply in the context, if there's a decision point to be made, how do we train ourselves to not be just a bad habit? How do we train it so that it's a good option? Well, that's actually simple. What you need to do then is, after you've gotten very good at doing this, we'll call it option A that you've been doing, forward throw escape. Now, we're going to practice the following week. Let's say it's a week later. Now we're going to practice doing back throw escape. We're just going to say, you know what? I'm going to work on doing back throw escape. Why? I'm overriding my previous programming. I'm unlearning forward throw escape as a default option, and I'm making a conscious effort to make back throw escape a conscious option. That is just what I'm going to do. And then I'm making it an unconscious option. It's just what I'm just always doing this week. Once you've already gained experience to make it like a no-brainer option A, and then turning option, and then overriding it with option B and learning how to do option B, then you've got the skill, you've got the ability to start working on later going, you know what, I'm going to sometimes do option A, sometimes do option B. Challenge yourself to not even care whether it's the correct option A or the correct option B. Train yourself to just be able to mix up by itself. Train yourself to be able to do option A whenever and option B whenever. Flip a coin in your head with no time thought about it, but just know that you're able to balance between option A and option B. I'm going to forward throw escape. I'm going to back throw escape. I'm going to forward throw escape. I'm going to back throw escape. And it never disrupted my flow. That's your goal. Okay? And that's using guard throw escape as the example of building an autopilot skill and then putting it in context, and then later giving yourself the ability to mix up on the decision points within that skill. And then after you're able to do that, then you can start thinking about the strategy, because your muscle already knows what it is. You've got this in muscle memory. You've got this as a reflex. Now it's time to train how you do it with thought, with conscious, with the focus on the mind games, with the focus on what the opponent is doing and what the opponent's not doing, or what your priorities are. That's when you can read my throw escape plan. Okay? And so again, step one, build it as a reflex, build it as a reaction, do it in a brain dead form so that it's like doing a combo, it's muscle memory. Make sure that it fits the normal context, make sure that you can manage to do the technique in the normal flow. 3, work on doing alternate options. Work on mixing it up without thinking so much about it, but just for the sake of mixing up. Just so that you know that you can train your hands to mix up properly. That's how you gain control of it. And then 4 is finally learning and working on the strategy, working on why am I doing this decision, and then it becomes dynamic with the decision process or a reaction process based on what the opponent's doing. So you could be keeping score or you could be planning, either one, whatever works for you. That's beyond the scope of this video on each side, but basically those are the steps to training a skill, and then turning it into, and then integrating it into your play, turning it into an option, and then finally, which allows you to have the ability to mix up, and it reduces the chance that it will become a bad habit. Again, an option is something that you do because you have as a choice, as a decision. A habit is something you do simply out of reaction, just because. And a bad habit is a habit that is being exploited by the opponent, and that you're not changing it up in reaction to that. Very important. That's pretty much what today's video is about. Let's talk about a few more places to developing skills in this way. Nitaku. Nitaku is Japanese for forced to choice. It actually means to choice, but they really emphasis on the forced to choice. It means that in Virtua Fighter you have, both players are standing, but you have enough frame advantage, which in this case is +6 or better, that your opponent cannot crouch under a throw. This is important because this means your opponent cannot do a fuzzy guard, which is an ultimate defensive technique that would defeat the mix-up of mid versus throw, which is generally, not always, but generally is the strongest mix-up in Virtua Fighter. In Ultimate Showdown, Final Showdown, it is the strongest mix-up. You still have pure mix-ups like mid-low. That's a really good one. But a lot of characters have very mediocre options there, to where it's really powerful to just, defend the mid in that case, and let the low hit sometimes, and try to react to the low, while always trying to defend the mid by default. That's kind of like the outcome that happens if you try to force mid low a little too much. A good opponent will just be like, you can do the low to me if it's not good enough. So I'm just going to focus on defending the mid, and then I'll just try to react to the lows when I can, but it's, the risk reward's a little more on mid, and so it's beneficial for me to just focus on, defending mid by default, and then try to react to the low, That's why mid-low is not always that strong in VF, but it can be depending on the character and the matchup and the situation. Walls can change it, ring-outs can change it. So Nitaku is basically like if you get it when like you jab somebody, when you do like a high jab and you interrupt them, when you get a red spark. You get it Nitaku is really important to develop from the high jab and from the low jab. Those are times when you create it, you should try to work. Hi again. Alright, I had a call, it disrupted, my Bluetooth messed up and it stopped the video. So, anyways, Nitaku is, I'm making it complicated, but basically Nitaku, you're going to either throw or do like a counter hit launcher or a launcher. If you have a character you have in mind, I can tell you what some good Nitaku options are for them. But basically, if I interrupt my opponent with a high jab or a low jab, I want to do Nitaku. That's what you should focus on. Train the reflex. And what's the reflex? Well, you can train yourself to just do the mid first, the launcher. Because at the beginner level, you should do the launcher. And then once you start fighting people that are defending, then you should do a throw instead. And then when they start trying to attack you, because they try to hit you out of throwing, then you can do the launcher again. That's pretty much it. So high jab interrupt people, mid low. Low jab interrupt people, mid low. That's basically doing Nitaku. Train yourself to just automatically practice Nitaku. And if we're following the same steps that we did before, start it out with the launcher. And don't worry if your opponent punishes you for doing the launcher. Just know that you're training yourself. And you're like, you know what? I did a launcher. Even though the consequence was a bit rough, I did the launcher whenever I jabbed and counter hit them, high jab or low jab. Okay? And then after that, make sure that you're doing it within the flow of the game, that that you're playing normal, but you're getting those jab counter hits, and you're doing that. Then practice option B. Okay, this game, I'm gonna jab, interrupt. Every time I jab, interrupt someone, I'm gonna do the throw. Just do that. So you did option A, now you're doing option B. And this could be day 1, day 2. So day 2, I'm doing jab in the throw, jab in the throw, low jab in the throw. Okay. But only when I get a red, mainly when I get a red spark, okay? You can do it on normal hit, it's just not as strong because they can fuzzy guard, but at your level, people are not going to fuzzy guard when they get jabbed. So it's fine to do this. So work on this mix-up. Work on this mid-low mix-up. This is the skill for Nitaku. And really try to make sure you're doing it every time you get a red spark from a jab. A high jab or a low jab. Okay? And then you can be mindful. Now that you're good at doing it both ways, A and B, now you can make decisions. My opponent likes to mash. I'm going to do launcher. Oh, he's finally defending. I know he's about to defend. I'm going to go for throw. My opponent likes to defend a lot. I'm going to jab counter hit in the throw. Oh, he's finally starting to launch me because he's doing what we call reverse Nitaku. He's like, screw you. You're going for a throw. I'm going to launch you. Now I'm going to do the launcher and I'm going to punish him for that. Now you can do Nitaku. Now you can do a mix-up. And it is a reflex from your high jab counter hit. And it's went from being a reflex to an option. A conscious choice. And one of the most critical choices in all Virtual Fighter 5 Ultra Shooter. So that's pretty simple there. Later on, yeah, you can do, of course, basic reflexes is getting yourself to identify when somebody does something that can be punishable. That's good. It's really, really good. It really, really is. It's just that it just really depends on if your opponent's showing it to you a lot or not. But you should always work on that, 100%. So a good way to work on stuff like that, and good way on situations, is finding a keyword for each situation that you run into. It could be mid-throw, right? Nitaku is 3 syllables, maybe we'll just say mid-throw. So like every time I block an uppercut, I'm going to say mid-throw. And that reminds me, I need to do a mid or a throw whenever I see that uppercut and I know I'm going to block it. Okay? So it's good to do to focus mentally like that. And so it's the same thing. When I block things that can be punished with a punch kick, I'm going to be PK. Just say it out loud whenever you see it. The goal is not to block it and then recognize it and then PK after it's all done. The goal is actually to kind of like work on recognizing it even before you block it. That sounds crazy for some people, but in Virtua Fighter, that's really how you should be operating. You should be looking at it as the situation unfolds. Even before you've blocked it, you kind of know when you're gonna block something. You know, I don't need to already block to know that I'm gonna block a very slow attack, right? It's similar even to a fast attack. It's just the more you play, the more you're able to see it. So if you can give yourself word prompts to help you with that, you'll be very strong and you'll be building these skills. I hope that helps. I may do another append because right now I'm about to go into work. I gotta take care of a lot of things once I get in there. But I wanted to help you understand all that. I hope this was helpful. Again, build your reflex. Identify what situation you need to recognize right away. Build the proper reaction to that situation in your gameplay. Make sure it flows. And then also practice the alternate option so that it can become a decision point in your gameplay. It's still a reflex, but it's now you've got a reactive decision point. And then eventually you can worry about the mix-up once you've mastered just being able to do it as a mix-up. Then you can understand when you should do the mix-up, when you should do A, when you should do B, maybe sometimes go to C. Very simple, but I hope this really helps you. And then of course, sometimes what you can do is simplify the learning process by creating 1 or 2 syllable words that you're going to use, to identify a situation and what you should do there. PK, mid throw, right? That one thing is guaranteed: throw on block, and it's -10. Throw, right? Do stuff like that. I'm working on it too. There's a lot of situations that I need to rein in on, so I'm there with you. Let's train together, and I'll talk to you later.